Welcome to Quizlet's Unconference 2021. My name is Jaime Avila, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how I use Quizlet in my science classroom. So, just a little bit of background on myself. I teach in San Jose, California at Silver Creek High School. Been doing that for about 15 years. Currently, I'm teaching marine biology and am the AVID coordinator at my school site. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me through social media, either through Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube. The handle is all the same, at Avila Teach. This conference is talking about a lot of different ways to use Quizlet. If I go over something too quickly or not at all, and you just want some more info about it, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And so the focus for my talk today is going to focus on a few things. So just a quick blurb about equity, freed versus paid plans, why I use Quizlet in science, how do I create a set both from scratch and when I'm borrowing material from someone else, how do I create tag diagram sets, which are super helpful. How do I use Quizlet for formative assessment? Not necessarily for grading, but to see where individual students are at and also where my class is at as a whole. And also a little bit about Quizlet Live and gamification. So the first one, just a quick blurb about equity in the classroom. Now, many of us know that a lot of students have cell phones, but not all students have cell phones. So research has shown about 95% of students have access to a smartphone. Now, this is going to be different for different schools and different areas. But just something that I had to keep in mind, and maybe something you want to keep in mind, is if your content is heavily dependent on Quizlet or influenced by Quizlet like my classroom is just making sure that all students have access, not just making the assumption that they all have smartphones. So what are some things that we can do with the other 5%? One of the great things that Quizlet allows you to do is to print out the terms. And so it's as simple as coming over to a set, going over to these little three buttons, clicking print, and now you can give them a paper version. And the reality is, and it's been my experience, that there are some students who prefer a paper version. For whatever reason, they'd rather hold a paper copy. They'll write on it or they'll carry it around inside their notebook. It works. So as I always tell my students, whatever works for you, if you're going to use it, just ask me for a paper version. I'll be more than happy to provide one for you. So why do I use Quizlet in my science classroom? First off, research shows that it's a powerful study tool. Flashcards are a powerful study tool, especially if you're going to combine it with something like distributed practice or retrieval practice. Two books that influenced me were How We Learn by Benedict Carey and also Powerful Teaching by Pooja Agarwal. And if you combine distributed practice and retrieval practice just within your own classroom, it really helps some of these terms sink in with your students. And in speaking with science teachers at my site, other sites, interactions I've had with other science teachers, a lot of us tend to agree that science, especially when you're focusing on the vocab, is like a foreign language. These are not terms that students are typically throwing around, and some of the terms that they are throwing around aren't quite right. So I know that for some, they'll say, well, it's really low on Bloom's taxonomy. Yeah, but we're going to move up. And so we need some of this foundational knowledge there. I always tell my students, just because you can define a word or two or five doesn't mean you know how they interact in a much broader concept. And so it's my job as an educator to lay that foundational work, but then show you, okay, well, how do these terms mesh with one another and how do they fit into this much broader concept or idea? One of the other helpful things is, again, not all students have cell phones with them. So like I said, it's like that old school flashcard. Instead of, forgetting it at home, or maybe you just didn't make it, they have access on their cell phone. And really the biggest selling point for why I use Quizlet is because students ask for it. Even before I tell them that I'm using Quizlet, students are always curious about, well, do you create Quizlets? Do you create study sets? And for me, that's the biggest selling point, that kids actually use it and are asking for it. One of the other powerful things is communicating with your students. What do they need? And so I always ask my students, if you need something else, please let me know. There's been times where I've had to create 2 smaller sets because it became a little overwhelming or just confusing having all these terms jumbled up in one gigantic set. Sometimes students have asked for images. Sometimes students have asked me to input audio. I'll talk about why in a little bit. Some students have asked me to adjust the definition or have just checked me like, there's this term and there's this definition, but it's not what you said in class. And so I'll look at it and like, I made a mistake. So communicating with your students is really important. And once they see that you actually listen to them and adjust, they're more likely to do it again. And it really helps. It's really helped me improve my study sets. One of the other cool things, easy to share. All of us became Google Classroom experts over 2020, or at least many of us did. I'm a big user of Remind. So if you don't know what Remind is, just a quick Google or YouTube search. Short version, it's like text messaging without exchanging phone numbers. So super helpful. So I can send them the link to a Quizlet study set just instantly. Some of them aren't going to look at Google Classroom till 2 days later, but they will look at their phones at some point throughout the day. So I find that super helpful. If you don't have one of these, maybe you're using a different learning management system like Schooloop, there's a copy link button that you can just drop right in. Or maybe you're using something like Discord. You can copy the link right into your Discord group. So free versus paid. A lot of what you're going to see today is from the paid version. The free version is very robust, but there are some things that I have found very helpful through the paid version. So just sort of a little disclaimer. These are some of the reasons why I personally use the paid version. One is multiple choice options. I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit. Tracking student progress. Again, I'll talk about how I use it as a formative assessment for my students. Organizing my classroom, having classes, but also having folders, and I'll try to describe a little bit of that as well. Not having ads, very useful. The 2 biggest selling points for me, number 1 is the ability to upload my own images. And when I create a set, I'll show you the stock photos that are provided versus you being able to upload the exact image that you want to upload. Also, creating diagrams. Again, super helpful. Those 2 alone in the science classroom are very helpful to me. There's also another feature. I in particular don't use it, but it is an option through your cell phone. Let's just say, and just me imagining how I might use it if I found an older textbook that had a really good glossary and I didn't feel like typing that out, because on a computer you can copy and paste, Control C, Control V, pretty easy. But if it's written, you'd have to type all that out. So the scan feature allows you to take a picture and then you can highlight the text and then it will put it into Quizlet without having to do all that typing. So pretty useful feature. I don't use it all that often. Most of my stuff I'm typing or copying and pasting from somewhere else. Now, in terms of creating a set, I'll talk about 2 different ways. One is where you borrow material that's already created, and another where you create your own. So when I first started using Quizlet, I was not creating my own sets. I was borrowing material that was already out there. Now, as time passed, I found it more useful to align the set with the content of my class. But if you're barely starting out, this is probably the way to go. Or if you're just in a pinch and you really need something, or you just need to get some ideas, this is a great way to get them. Clicking on a certain set of buttons will cut down on your search for sure. So here's what I recommend. When you're in Quizlet and you're searching, I would click on free, Premium, there are now sets that even if you are a Quizlet teacher or a Quizlet Plus user, it will cost you money to see those sets. Down over here under the type, I would select sets. So new ones are textbooks and questions. They're sort of tied together, mainly math books. You could search for a class like SC Marine Bio, or users. You could look up myself as a user on Quizlet. Created by, I would recommend teacher. So there are verified creators. I believe McGraw-Hill is one of them and a few others. Those tend to be tied with premium sets. Maybe not all. Plus users and all would include students. So this is where, like I said, if you want to cut down on your search, and you still need to look at it, but maybe more vetted than the others, I would select teacher. So just coming over here to Quizlet. On the search, let's try DNA. And then again, I want a free set. And I want to see teacher created sets. Your sets will always appear at the top, but I'm just going to use someone else's as an example. So let's just say we're scrolling and there's one. So let's use this. They're a teacher. I'm going to click it. And you're probably going to see repeats because other people have probably made copies of this. You can make your set private if you want. And down over here, there is a little button that says customize. Really, it's just the copy button. So I'm going to click that. And I'm going to call this DNA Avila copy for right now. And now you can go through and say like, okay, I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover that. I'm going to cover that. If it's highlighted in yellow, it means that it appears twice in the set. So if I'm looking, and then maybe I'm not going to cover purines and pyrimidines. I'm going to delete that out of my set. I don't want that in there. Don't want a true false. You're just looking through like, okay, I don't want that. Okay, I'm probably going to cover that. And again, just go through and make sure everything looks good. If there's something missing from the set that you would like to add, just at the very end, XYZ. And you can enter in a definition XYZ here, like so. Some of them come with images. So if you borrow a set that already has images, but you don't like the image that they used, you can delete it out of the set. And if you want to add in an image, I'll talk about that next when we create a set from scratch. For now, you need to decide whether you want to make this visible to everyone. So if you leave it on the default setting, which is visible to everyone, students and other teachers will be able to find the set and make a copy of the set. You can change this so that it is only visible to certain classes. So if I did this, I can decide, okay, I'm only going to let my marine bio class view this, or people with a password, or just me. So for right now, if you don't want anyone to see it, you would just click just me. So only you would see this. Certain classes, only your classes that you've shared this with will see it, and it would become unsearchable by other people. Editable, usually it's just me. I've never found a good use to have it be editable by certain classes or people with password. If you know of a great way, please let me know. So for right now, I'll just leave it as everyone and just click save. Once you're ready, click create. And now you're ready to publish it to Google Classroom, send it out in a remind, copy and paste it into your Discord group, whatever it happens to be. Okay, so that's borrowing from a set that's already been made, and you're just making some small adjustments. What if you want to create something from scratch? Well, then just go to the create button. You're going to create a study set. So one of the cool things about Quizlet is predictive text. So I'm going to just keep with our DNA theme here. So DNA. Quizlet has seen this before, so it's going to give us a couple of definitions here on the side. Maybe I don't like that first one. Maybe I just want them to know that it's deoxyribonucleic acid. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. It saves me a ton of typing. What about image? Okay, so now There are some stock photos here that I can look through. They give you, I want to say about 30 to 40 images that you can choose from. If you find one that you like, you can just go ahead and click on it, and there you go. It adds it in. If you want to add in your own image, this is where the paid version comes in handy. You can select an image that you've saved on your desktop or in a folder and use that particular image. And I'll show you sort of the difference why. So if we kind of look at this picture right here, I'll look up RNA. So, RNA, and then I'm just going to use the predictive text over here. Ribonucleic acid. I'm going to look for an image, and I'll just use this first one. But you'll see how, again, if you're getting really, really picky, like sort of this style and this style are different. So maybe you want to pick two images that are similar in style in the way that they were designed. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you would want to upload your own images. And so you would just keep adding terms on until you're ready, and then just click create. Oh, got to give it a title. So DNA original. And it'll ask if you want to share it. You can share it later if you want. If you need to come back and edit something, so maybe you want to add more terms, just click on the little pencil button. And you can come back and add cards. Now, for students, they can use the flashcard version. So they can click on flashcard, and now here we go. So your traditional back and forth flashcard. And they can go back and forth on these here. A couple options, they can shuffle it if they don't want to keep the original order. So there's some other options here, like you can include audio in them if you want. Some students, again, in the past have requested that I say the word for them. They're having trouble saying deoxyribonucleic acid for the first time, and so they want to hear it. And so I'm more than happy to record some audio for them. Down over here are the different the different ways they can practice. I typically use the learn function. It's one of my favorites out of all of them. After I do the tagged image, I'll show you how that works. Write, spell, test, match, and gravity. These are more gamified, so just something a little bit more fun for students. So let's just say you wanted to create a tagged image. So let me come back to this. Tagged image sets are super, super useful. Students love them. Well, maybe they don't love them, but they at least appreciate when I do them. So for example, let's just say they're learning about oceans and seas in my marine biology class. And instead of creating a term like North Pacific and then having a definition and then having a picture of North Pacific, I can just create a map with bubbles that when you hover over them, it'll tell you where you're at on a map or on a diagram. So people in chemistry and physics and marine biology and biology and anatomy and physiology and forensics, whatever you're teaching, can get really creative when using diagrams. And again, it's really, really easy to create. So I'll show you how I do that. The process is pretty much the same when you create a set. So you're going to go back, create a study set, but instead of starting to type something, you're going to use this thing that says add and label a diagram. Now you can't see the files that I'm selecting, so I'm just going to pick some random one that I have here. And so that's good. And so now I can start tagging this image. I'll try to zoom in a little bit here. But my favorite feature is this little pencil icon in the upper right hand corner. Now this is going to allow me to blur words out. So I'm going to tag hydrogen bonds, but I don't want them to see that word because they're going to know what it is. I don't want them to see the word base pairs because I'm going to ask them to identify base pairs in a little bit. Defeats the purpose if it's right in front of them. And so all you do is just create these boxes. And let's just say you mess up and you don't quite get the word all blurred out. You're really picky about it. Just click the undo button, just come back and redo. Once you have everything blurred out, everything looks good, just click the check mark. And now we can start labeling our image. So the first one is just adding a point. If you have a very detailed image and you're zoomed in, because there's a lot of little details in there, you can use this pan image, so you're not zooming in and out all the time. So this one's not that detailed, so I'm just going to zoom back out. And let's just say this first one right here. So again, click add a point. And then I want this to be hydrogen bond, like so. Now you can add a definition if you want, but you don't have to. Because this is just a diagram where I want them to identify something, I'm not going to add a term in. So it's just going to be hydrogen bond. You can also add in a rectangle. So for this part over here, put that, and I'm going to call this the base pair. And if you have an oddly shaped image, the pen tool, fantastic. So for the sugar, I just click on the corners. And when I'm done, just click on my original dot. And I can label an oddly shaped part of the diagram. And yeah, I'm only going to do 3. So once you're done, you can click create. You'll notice, oh, I got to give it a name. So DNA labels, create. You'll notice there are no flashcards. So flashcards do not exist with diagrammed images because they're going to be hovering over the terms. They can zoom in here, and with the little hand they can move, and it'll tell them what the pieces are. They can still use the learn function. So this is where I'll show you how the learn function works. Again, it's a great way for students to get practice in. So they start off with something very basic like matching, just multiple choice. So here, what is it? Okay, what's the sugar? Of course, you'd have more terms than just 3. So here, okay, it's a hydrogen bond. Here, it's the base pair. So again, starting off very basic. Once it's like, nice job, you can click continue. And now it's asking, okay, what's the hydrogen bond? Okay, kind of got to think about the image. Okay, and then it's going to ask, okay, did you know that that's where the hydrogen bond was? And you're like, yeah, I got it. Or nope, then study it again. So for right now, I'll just click got it. Base pair. Okay, got it. Sugar. And again, if students are, okay, I got it. Once they've mastered it, they just click finish learn. If they want to go back, they can reset their progress. So study again. And there are options. So I'm going to take off the flashcard option. You can put the audio in if you've had audio. Foreign language teachers use this quite a bit. So I'm going to reset my progress. Go hydrogen bond, go sugar, and base pair. And they can come back and they can repractice. Now, the learn function, if they're progressing very quickly, then it'll make it harder with the write in function. So here, they have to type in, and yes, I know they can open up a second tab and try to figure it, but if they really are using this correctly, they would try to type it in to see if they knew the answer. So hydrogen bond, okay. Maybe study again. And so it'll tell them, okay, well, you've learned 2 terms, but you got to go back and study 1. And so the whole while they're doing this, it's collecting data. And this is what I'm going to use to check their individual progress and also to check their progress as a class. But again, the study tool, or the diagramming, super, super helpful. Just a little pro tip, if you're planning on using diagrams, have a clear picture. Usually anything in the thousands, so 1200 by 900, 1200 by 1200, whatever it happens to be. I just found in my experience that anything 400 by whatever or lower is going to be poor image quality. It's going to get really blurry as they start to zoom in. So try to stay in the thousands, play around with it and see what works. So how do I use it as formative assessment? Now, unfortunately, I onboarded all my students. So I can't show you any data because there are no more students in my classroom at the end of the year. I take them all down in preparation for the following year. But if they're using learn, write, spell, test, it collects data on how they've been doing. And I don't use this as a way to grade them. Plus, it becomes too difficult. For my marine bio class, all 150 of my students are part of that one class. It would get really hard to grade them because different periods are all mixed together, and sometimes their names are shortened. For example, mine would be J Avila, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's some other weird, tech user 557, something like that. I don't know. It'd be too hard to grade it that way. So the way that I use it is just to have conversations with them. So one of the ways I use it as a whole class first is if you go to a set. So let me go back to one of my sets. So I'm just going to use ocean acidification here. So down over here, students will have their stats, so how they've done. You can also set it to alphabetical, or you can set it to original. I tell students set it to original, not alphabetical. But so you don't see it here because I don't have students onboarded. But one of the things that you would see is there's another tab for teachers called students, and you could see how your class has been doing as a whole. And if I've created a set and I notice that this particular term or terms are missed, then I might need to reteach that. Or maybe it's one of those ones I messed up on the definition. So I got it wrong, and one of my students says, it's wrong. Like, no wonder, only 10% of the class got it. It's because, I messed up on it. If it's somewhere in the 90% range, then it means I'm probably okay on that term. And so this really helps out when I'm looking at my class as a whole. Where do I need to reteach? Where do I need to focus on? What might I need to change? Now, as far as individual students go, I can pull up their individual data. Of course, if they have a weird name like Tech User 557 or something like that, I have to ask, what's your Quizlet username? But it opens up a conversation as far as have you been studying? So if they haven't performed well on a test, I can go back and I can look at their study patterns using Quizlet. Now, if I look at the last week and see that they haven't studied anything and they've done poorly on a test, then we can have a conversation about, okay, well, why weren't you able to study this week? Did you study this week? And Quizlet, like I said, is a fantastic tool. And so if you're not using it, maybe that's why you're not doing so well. So like I said, it opens up a great conversation between myself and individual students. And if they're never studying, and there could be reasons for that, but if they're never studying, they're never putting any time in outside of class to learn, foundational terms, probably why they're having trouble in the classroom or at least on an assessment. So great way, like I said, for me to talk to kids and see, okay, how are you doing? If you're struggling here, let's figure out why. Quizlet Live, gamification, again, super fun. In terms of Zoom, individual is the way to go. It's really hard to do random teams on Zoom or Google Meet. When we're in person, random teams, one of my favorite game modes to use. Now, some kids love Kahoot. My only problem with Kahoot is, again, just in my personal experience, when the leader gets to a certain point, other kids stop trying. They sort of see that the leader is so far up the board, there's really no incentive for them to try anymore. Like they're just not going to catch up. Whereas Quizlet Live, and I love this for random teams, is they have to get 12 right in a row. in order to win. And sometimes what happens is, even though students know it really, really, really well, they will click on something because they're just going too fast. They'll click on the wrong term and it'll reset them back down to 0. And a team that was right behind them will be able to catch up. And so it keeps kids engaged throughout, because you don't win until it says you've won. There's still a chance that you can drop down to 0, even though a team is at 11 or at 10 and they only need 1 or 2 more to go, and there's a team at 7. They still try, because if that team gets it wrong, they have a chance to catch up. So again, super fun mode. Now, unfortunately, I don't have students here with me right now, so I can't model this. I'll show you the basic setup. So we're just going to do random teams. You could either do definition, and then they have to select the term, or it gives them the term, and then they have to select the definition. You'll have to play around with this to see what works best for your students. So I'm just going to pick this one just because. I don't find that students use QR codes too much. Typically, I project this up on the screen and they log into their Chromebooks and they just type in the code and we're ready to go. A couple of options like adding in music. If you clicked individual by accident or random teams by accident, you can click on the options and switch back to the other type using these little buttons right here. And then once you have at least 4 players, you can hit the start button and then they're off to the races. It's pretty intuitive, even if students have never played Quizlet.live. Within 5 minutes, they understand how it works. Again, I tried this 2 or 3 times a week just to kind of liven it up right at the beginning of class. Sometimes at the end of class, if we finish a little bit early and like, okay, let's try a Quizlet.live. And so great for review as well. So sometimes we haven't looked at a topic for 4 weeks. It's been 4 weeks since we were on that topic, just randomly popping up in old quizzes and saying, okay, we're going to brush up on some old stuff. Again, great way to have some fun and a little bit of recall behind it. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Like I said, I know I covered quite a bit. I probably missed something, or I need to go more in depth on something. We talk about it for hours on end. If you have any questions, like I said, please reach out to me at Avila Teach, either through Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube, and I'll try to answer your questions. So hopefully you found that helpful.